Mr. and Mrs. Clark, welcome to Straight to the Point.
Thank you.
Could you please start off by telling us a little about yourself, about your family, how long you guys been married, how many children you had, to let them know you're a professional, that you're experienced with children, raising children.
We're married long. We're far from professionals. Nothing of the sort. Seriously, Michael, my husband, and I, we have been married since 1983. That would be the equivalent this year to 33 years. We started having children immediately. Our first was stillborn. The second was Michael Jr., and we ended with a William. And so that gives us 8 children together, living children together, 9 with our stillborn.
We both came from large families. I had there were 14 of us in our family, and I was like the third youngest and the youngest boy. So my wife had 7 in her family, so we were both pretty large families, and when we got married we wanted to have 5. So it turned out to be 8.
That's a number I don't remember saying, but
yeah, we talked about that. And we talked about also when the first child comes that she wouldn't work anymore. And that took place, and she raised our children and homeschooled 7 of them to a certain age before they went to any public school.
they actually all were homeschooled. It's just a very short span for the last child. With respect to the mom being at home, my role was to be at home. That's usually what a lot of white people are privy to do. Well, we were not middle class necessarily. I would say we were moderate income, not necessarily middle class, but we understood that the value of raising family was more than having things. So we decided that I would stay home and we would learn basic living, practical living for our family. That would be not just preparing foods at home, having the children at home to educate them. That was more based upon our preference for our values spiritually and how we wanted them to be reared in a way that they would not be denied their faith or the privilege of us choosing their faith. We also learned that educationally the schools were not giving our children a level of quality education to allow them to not only compete, but to be able to grow with a well-rounded vision and understanding in the world about their place, and help them to even be guided about what they would want to be doing and preparing them for college that would ready them for doing whatever their visions or dreams were. The other thing was we lived in an area where there was high crime. High crime because there were lack of education facilities, the quality wasn't there. There was a lot of issues with single family parenting. There was a lot of issues with drugs and its influence in and around the neighborhood and the school. There was a lot of issues with the lack of policing. You know, the elements in our community were definitely not the same that you would find in that of a white affluent or a middle class neighborhood. And even though we were parents who were concerned and involved in the community and we were home educators, we still had the challenge of the environment around us. So our biggest challenges were to allow our children to be an active part of the, for me I would say, allow our children to be an active part of the community because we cared about community. We wanted our children to know their neighbors, to be involved with their neighbors. At the same time, we saw that there was this terrible, I would say, for me, it seemed like there was just this absence of a kind of definition of what is valuable, what was important in terms of the people that we were beginning to meet, that our children had become attracted to. The educational part was really huge. As we progressed in age, the children grew older. The fact that, again, we were not middle class at some point, there were those challenges of employment, having job losses and having to still maintain the care for a family. I had to go out to work. So then that challenge was, in a neighborhood like that, having the children to grow up and have a sense of security while being safe at home. That is one that people commonly face. I became more and more concerned about that because, again, I have these strong values as a Christian. I wanted my children to represent all the things that we taught them fundamentally. We really taught them what God's Word said. We really taught them this is how it's done. We brought into our influence people who not only believed and practiced what we believe, but diverse people. You know, our children grew up, they had some relationship with white folk. They had some relationship with people who were homeschooled, some who were not homeschooled. So they had different kinds of experiences, and I thought that was really important. But going back to work, it gave children more opportunity to make choices that would, again, challenge what they believe. And it's then that I felt a particular threat for the children because I thought they believed one thing, and sometimes I saw where they didn't seem to practice and separate themselves from things that were those fears that they would become involved with. So raising children in our society has become, to me, increasingly more detrimental without parents having a strong relationship with their children. I think we don't really have a defined rule book, but we do have God's Word that gives us some straightforward, clear answers about how children are to be raised. And I think if you are a parent that has a husband and a wife, there's an awful lot that you learn when you're raising children about yourself and your children. So there's a challenge in itself that's apart from being black in society. It's just being understanding in relationship, how do you be a family? How do you be married and raise children together? So these are things that I think, again, you're not necessarily thinking about these when you enter into family life, but as your life goes on, the journey goes on and you're growing your family, you start to realize that there are issues that are different from what you would have imagined. You have to deal with these issues. You may not have the right thoughts about how to deal with them, but then you have to bring other people in. And it's whether you are, it's a point of humility, whether you're humble enough to tell people, you know, I'm struggling with this, I need some help with this. Those are challenges I think everybody faces. It doesn't have anything to do whether you're white or black. When you find that you're having those questions in your life that are not being resolved, and you're having these difficulties as a parent with your child or with your spouse, if you don't early ask somebody for help, they can become enlarged. They can become the stumbling block for the children. The children want to see a solid family. The children want to see parents not only being together, they want to see parents who have a sense of love between each other that just change. They want to be corrected. But children aren't corrected so easily when they have a lot of other things going on in the family life. They are more angry. They get confused. And then they start to rebel. And they start to turn out more to the things that you don't want them to turn out to. And so by that time, the challenge is, again, are you going to humble yourself and ask some pretty hard questions about what you're doing, how you're doing? And if you don't do those things, you have a very difficult course ahead of you in a world like we live in today.
Well, I just, looking back, there was a sense of getting them educated about the history and about what we went through as a people growing up. I went to segregated school when I was in elementary school. I didn't have a choice to go to an integrated school when I was in elementary school. So even though I lived in a community that was surrounded by white people, I still couldn't go to their schools. I had to go to a black school. So I think coming through and the things I have to come through in that, and then being integrated into the work world and working with different people from different lands and different concepts and different beliefs, I just want the children to remember that they have a great opportunity now, because a lot of things have opened up to them that weren't opened up to me or my brothers and sisters or my parents. They didn't have even though my parents paid taxes, they couldn't go to any school they wanted to. They couldn't send their children to any school they wanted to. So I think that as African American men and African Americans, period, a sense of knowing their history, knowing what it took to get them to enjoy the freedoms and the liberties that they have now, to appreciate that, not to take it for granted. Because there are some people who are still being oppressed and don't have that opportunity to take advantage of the opportunities that they have. So I think that's one of the things that I try to instill within them, that remember where you came from, remember that you were blessed. Because when we look back, we did something that was diametrically opposed to. We lived in the suburbs, left the suburbs to come to the city to start a family, and people would say, why are you going into the city? Because the city was nothing like it is today. There were, the crime, the drugs, the murders that were taking place in our surrounding community. And people saying, you're bringing your children into this? Why are you doing this? And that was the call of the Lord to come into the city. And we saw that it was much more of a blessing as we look now. Weathering through over 30 years in the city has been truly a blessing. So it's they've seen a lot, we've seen a lot. We've seen changes in ourselves, changes in our family through living in the city, and we've seen how people are being pushed out of the city, or being pushed in the corners of the city because of the economics, because of social ideas that they're pushing people out. So this month, Black History Month, is a very important month. It's a very important month that we should get more and more educated about who we are and where we want to go as a people. Number one, with the Lord, but most of all, we've got to understand that we have a purpose. And that purpose can be positive and not just hanging out. We have a purpose. God has given us a purpose, so we've got to take advantage of those opportunities now that we have as afforded us. Well, to me, to be the African American is that's something they gave us. And personally, I didn't come from Africa. I was born here, and I understand the use of the word, because when I was coming up, it was either the N-word, Negro, colored, and black before we got to African American. So we were called all those different names before we got to where we are today, African American. So to be African American is be part of a race of people who struggle from the time they were brought over here, not by choice. Struggle to put in servitude for a number of years, over 400 years, So, and struggled to get equality. People died for equality. People died for freedom, just because of the color of their skin. And to not to be ashamed or think that because of, and I think that sometimes we have been marginalized as a people into thinking that the other side, other colors are better, even though we may not say it, but our actions, how we live our life may say that. Where I shop, where I live, may say to us that, well, I want to live with them because they perceive that everything's nice and safe and clean instead of living with people of my own race. Mm-hmm. So we've been duped into that, and then we have this disagreement among each other. So we divide ourselves amongst each other. We've already been divided between black and white. Now we're dividing between black and black, or shades of black. So we've got to understand that we have nothing to be ashamed of as a people. But what we do with what we have been given, is the important part. But as being an African American, I'm proud to be an African American. I'm not ashamed of it. There's struggles that we still have to face every day that some people won't even have to consider every day as an African American, especially African American male. So I know that certain things that I encounter every day that in my life that whites don't even think about. It doesn't even cross their mind because it's for granted that,
Any examples that come off the top of your mind immediately?
Sure. When I go shopping, I see. Actually, I was in the store today. I went to a store today, and I was in there walking around looking at some products and stuff, and not once. And I passed many salespeople, and I've been in retail for over 30 years, and not one person asked me, "May I help you?" Not one. And this is a newly opened store that thrives on customer service. And I said to myself, "Wow, that's amazing." That not one person, I wasn't dressed that shabby, I was just casual, but, that kind of resonated with me and said, wow, how you look and who you are color-wise means to some people perceive. And this was not done by white folk, this was done by black folk. I wasn't even acknowledged. So it's like, where are we going? Again, that division. You draw that line and you take for assumption, well, they are that, and so we won't, approach him because he doesn't look like he wants to spend any money. He doesn't look like he has any money. So we draw those assumptions, and assumptions are done throughout our society. So, that was one experience. Just today, I experienced that as a shopper, and I come across that in many different areas also. So it's not just that. Being a civic leader, I've seen that the disrespect is given to blacks in leadership. It's increasing even more so. I mean, you look at that president, congressman, and mayor. So it's not just. So it's the whole gamut.
I have had some experiences that are different, but when you asked the question, my mind rolled back to being a child. I'm dark-skinned. As a child, I was very, very skinny and considered an ugly black child. But again, this wasn't an offense that came from whites directly, but it came from black young people who had been fed the poison about their identity and would mistreat each other. So I was fortunate enough, however, as an older child and the first girl to have a father, and I think about this often, and I recently thought about this, who my father used to say to me, "You're my little princess, you're beautiful." He'd take me out on little dates. And more than anything I could have imagined, the power of that as an adult, I realize now the magnitude of that, his relationship with me. So I grew up, I began to grow up believing that, I was important. I knew I wasn't really a princess, but I realized I was important because my father said it. And my father was not in my life throughout my years. He left us young when we were teenagers. I was barely a teenager. But you know, that's just one thing that comes to mind, is how we don't really realize how important we are in this human race, because we have learned a lie and we practice this almost a defiance against our Creator about our lives being as important as a white person or Asian or anybody else in this world. That's what's so important to me about my faith. I feel that I am an equal. I feel that I am as important as any other person. Another experience I had is the way I talk. I've always talked different, even in school, from my peers. And when I grew up to be a teenager, people thought I was white when they didn't see my face. And when I would go on interviews and they saw the face with the person who spoke over the phone, I literally remember one interview on Wisconsin Avenue at a TV station. I went there for an interview for a secretarial position, I believe it was. And I got into the door, and immediately I felt the shunning when the person saw me and I introduced myself. It went downhill. The interview lasted literally minutes. I came away feeling like the weight of the world, like bricks, had been put on my shoulder. And I decided somewhere along that line that I wasn't going to let people tell me who I was or define how important I was. And it was a struggle then, and it still can be a challenge to make sure that I'm not fighting anybody about whether my blackness is good enough, but that I sustain the mind that I am beautifully made by the Almighty God and I'm as important as anybody else. My responsibility, however, changed when I became a Christian, because in my life I realized it's not to try to be like somebody else. I realized it's not to try to make as much money to have an identity to measure how important I was in this world. I realized that everything I have is already what's necessary for me to be a fulfilled person, to do the things that are needed in life. And so when I'm at work or wherever I am, it makes me freer in identifying with people. It makes me freer to fail even. If I fail, I fail. It doesn't mean that black people are not worth anything and they're secondary. I was recently in a situation where at my job, a civil rights agency, they did a review of salaries and they did a review of people's performances and decided that most people would get an increase according to the market value of those jobs that were similar to the jobs that we perform in our industry. And I was one that did not get that change in the market value salary. And I decided, you know, I don't have to necessarily, I have to do the research first of all, and I didn't finish the research on the market value rate for the job that I do. But I decided I don't have to fight with these people about this in that way, fighting in that way that I'm going to buck up and say, look, this isn't right, you're not fair, because I understand people very purposefully do what they do. I continue to do what I do to my fullest capacity, be responsible doing what I'm doing, and treat people no different. Because eventually I realize what it is that I deserve, I'm going to get it. And that doesn't mean you let people take advantage of you and say nothing. I just believe that if I say something, I need to know what I'm saying. So I've learned in life, you know, we need to do all that we have the opportunity to do, become not only empowered in terms of knowledge, but we need to be responsible to make sure that we do what we know how to do fully. And I think when we start to do that, we start to value our own selves. And that is something I've grown to do, because I was once at a point I was trifling at work. This is when I was not a professing Christian living anything. I got to work late. I hung out. I did only enough to get by. I had fun with my bosses. And that is the kind of thing that creates a negative image that we really don't want. And I was blindsided and couldn't see that until I became a Christian. So for me, being a person that is transformed makes all the difference. I'm not threatened by anybody else's color, race, salary, income, where they live, what they drive, what house they live in. In fact, I have a sense of feeling a little concerned for some people who have more than me, because that has made them not only prideful, but it has made them to the point that they're insensitive and they're always competitive and they're pretty corruptive in their ways of doing things. They don't want to admit that they have limits and can fail. And it's easier for me, you know, having become a Christian, to be black in this world. I don't like a lot of things. It's easier for me to say I don't like a lot of things. I just had a conversation with our neighbor yesterday, and she asked me, I don't even remember what she asked me. We started talking about Black History Month. We started talking about this neighborhood. She asked me about crime in the neighborhood. And you all know me, I just started telling her, yes, crime was pretty bad in the neighborhood. And I said, I want to ask you not to take an offense, but until what is now defined as gentrification began to happen progressively in our neighborhood, we did not enjoy this level of peacefulness night after night. Because we, no matter how hard we fought for it and called policemen, we did not have police presence. I said we didn't have a lot of things, and I explained to her how my husband, being a civic leader, fought for a lot of change. Some change happened, but much of it didn't. Even though it was proposed, planned for, budgeted. But now that the neighborhood's changed, many things have changed. And I told her that even though it's changed, it doesn't change who we are in the neighborhood. We still help to build this neighborhood. And we still need to have people understand we deserve to be respected in this neighborhood.
Thank you. Immediately, what are 3 words that come to mind when you think about the African American person and the African American experience here in America?
Suffrage, iniquity, crime. I didn't mean to say iniquity. Inequality is the word, but it is iniquity when you talk about crime, but inequality. And suffrage, we suffer because of the inequality. And iniquities and crime are not a good excuse, but are the reasons a lot of times why there's a lot of suffrage, and that's as a result of the suffrage and the inequalities, when people don't have something stronger that they stand for.
Inequality would be one of them, but I think education would be one of the words. Inequality, education, and justice. Those would be the 3 words. From the beginning was inequality, and education is even more paramount today. And as the scripture says, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. And there's a lot that people aren't being told, that we weren't told. We didn't have the opportunity. Even through a month like Black History Month, we really don't delve into the different areas as in depth as we need to know about our history. And justice. We see that we never got justice. We never have. So we see now that even more so, the justice and education and equality is raising its head again, like it did in the 1800s, like it did in the 1920s and 30s and 40s and 50s, and with in 1960 with Brown and Pierce, the Board of Education. So those things are now raising their heads up. There's inequality in our society today. Fair housing, jobs, education.
And the water issue.
The inequality there, you know, injustice. You know, blacks are being shot in the streets by police. The justice system, who is not geared, slanted toward injustice towards people of color. In education, we're pouring more and more money into education, get less and less results. And that, you know, we have apartheid educational systems in our cities. In every major city you look at, the educational system is dismal for people of color. But we're still pouring millions of dollars into it, and we're not getting the results. And that's something that needs to be answered. But those words that ring out to me.
I have one more question for you. What makes you proud to be African American?
For me, it's simply, it's very basic. It's who I am. And it's not some Bible byline, but I really believe that God made me in His image. And I just happen to be a woman of color, black, is called in this world today. And I'm very thankful. That's why I like Afrocentric hair. I really do appreciate having my natural hair. And again, I had to grow and mature to that point. I appreciate my features even. You know, I had to, again, all in my growth and development as a Christian woman, to appreciate I am who I am. And to really have a complaint against that is to say to God, you know, you make things one way and it's good, and you make things in another way, and you're a God who's not just and it's not good. That would be agreeing with the lie that's been told forever. So I really do appreciate who I am. I've learned to appreciate, and I continue to learn to appreciate who I am. I continue to want to be better person who I am. And when I say better who I am, I really want to watch that. I don't want to emulate something because a TV or magazine says this is what you should look like, or this is what you should buy to feel better. I literally threw away a magazine last night because those thoughts jumped out at me. And I tore it in pieces and threw it away.
This is the way God made me, and
right.
I'm glad to be black. I wouldn't want to be anyone else because it's a purpose that I am black. It's a purpose that I'm not ashamed of, and I think that I'm black for a reason, to make a difference wherever we are, whether it's in a home, whether it's in a community, whether it's at work, to make a difference, to deposit stuff into our children, that they're not ashamed, that they be not ashamed of who they are, so they can pass it on to generation to generation to generation of people that's not, just accept who you are, because there's only one of us. There's no one else like this in the world. I can't be anybody else. I don't want to be anybody else, but what God has made me, and I'm happy to be black. I'm thankful to be black, and don't think at all that this is something that I don't want to be. I wish I was a different color. That has never crossed my mind. It gives me more determination to do, and to see the lack of inequities and the lack of and the injustices and the lack of education. Just gives me more drive to do best I can, no matter where it's at.
Well, it's definitely been a pleasure having you both on Straight to the Point. Thank you so much for coming out.
And we thank you. We thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you for sharing your experience and your wisdom. Thank you. Thank you.